Well, hello folks. It's been a while since I've posted anything. I'm going to do kind of an update. It's so hot these days here in Northwest Florida, I can barely stand it. And of course, life happens. A lot of things been pulling me away. So here we go. You might have seen or remember this air-layered Trident Maple. Well, starting out, probably the first spring that I took it off, I noticed borers had gotten into it, and I had recommended treating any air layers as the tree is developing in the air layering stage, and then immediately after. Well, this tree developed a lot of areas, and you can probably see right here where the borers had started eating into it, and right here a lot of pinholes. You can see all through here. And what I did was an aggressive treatment of pesticide and fungicide to stave off the infestation. And so far it seemed to have worked well enough to get me into the summer. So what I did was use a combination of different pesticides and herbicides, or fungicides rather, broad spectrum, and some more of your systemic type fungicides is what I used on this tree to take care of the infestation. And again, it seemed to work pretty good. I've been feeding it aggressively. I've used 13 granulated fertilizers. I've used an Osmocote or time release fertilizer, and I've used a liquid feed fertilizer also. I know a lot of people won't use a granulated fertilizer in potted plants, but again, you see my plant is alive, and that's because this isn't my first rodeo with growing plants. And I guess taking care of costs makes a difference too. So anyway, I don't recommend that, but that's what I do. And again, I used even sulfur, powdered sulfur. And what I did was I got, I guess you can say, my wind direction, and I just broadcasted sulfur in the entire area. I mean, all over the place, not just the immediate tree, which I dusted that specifically, but all around. And not only is that good for this tree, you can see I've got camellias here, and they've got good green foliage. Other trees here, Trident maples, Japanese green maples. And so it didn't harm the trees. That's a eastern red cedar. You can see the big trident out there, trident here, Procumbens nanas. I tried not to let it get onto the junipers, the sulfur. Okay, so, you know, not really a good thing to let the sulfur get on your junipers. But, and here we have crab apple, and there is a plum in that pot. So the sulfur, broadcasting that around, not only does it help in staving off a fungal infestation, but hey, it helps certain plants to thrive and to grow. So anyway, after all of the treatment and such, the main thing that I did, and the most important thing that I did to this tree, was to take off all of the flaky bark, okay? All of the flaky bark. And hopefully you can see this right in this area here. You can see the color differentiation, and you can probably even see the tracks where the bugs, or the larvae of the bugs, tracked underneath the bark, eating away at the cambium. And once I did that, I saw no more issues with the larvae of the infestation bothering this tree. And again, I've watered it heavily, fed it heavily, and I mean, it's been fed quite heavily, and I keep it really good and moist. Good drainage, so I'm not worried about oversaturating the trunk. And maybe you can see there little pinholes where we had some boring going on, and all of that area I even took a syringe and injected pesticide into as many of those ports as I could find. So that's my little offering right there, and I don't know if you can see that, but that's a little Trident Maple I'm working on right there. Nice Nabari, nice branching. Okay, another thing I've done was go back and take one of my pomegranates, and I'm rooting this part right here. This is actually the original trunk in the plant that I bought from a local nursery, and the larger part took over, and because it was younger, it grew faster. But anyway, here we are at the last, well, the last couple of days of June. The middle of July, July 15th or so, I should be able to take this off. I started May 25th, so I should have plenty of roots in there by the middle of next month, July. And that's just a fig that I done some wiring on, and you can see there's fruit in it. As a matter of fact, it's starting to turn, and pretty soon the birds and the squirrels will be over here to take it. But that's just one of the plants that I'm working on. And as a matter of fact, today I did a lot of air layering and cutting up of figs, Zelkova. Right here we have a big rooted cutting of a fig tree. I tried just letting it root on its own, and I had a big pot on it trying to air layer it off. I let it run for 2 years. Experiment, experiment, experiment. I'm always about experimentation. The fig tree roots really easily certain times of the year, and especially when the moisture is up. Well, I was trying to see how this would do, and after 2 years it's like I got to go on and do what I need to do. So what I did was just took my saw and whacked that off, stuck it in this pot, and I hit it with a whole lot of water, made sure that everything is good and saturated, and then I hit it with B1 solution, and as you see, and that's about 14 inches at the base. So that's a rooted cutting, 14 inches thereabouts, and you can probably see that part right there, which I cut off of that previously, and because I was just simply going to at first just top the tree and then take the stump and work with it, but I got the bright idea of trying to air layer that, and it's like, well, let's see what happens. So anyway, here shortly I'm going to take some of these branches off, and I'll probably start with air layering. I mean, as anybody's got, I've got plenty of time. I've got no rush in trying to develop this into a bonsai. So I'll probably just put air layers on that. And we're walking. I'm going to show you the base of that. I just air layered this fig out today. It's so tall, and I've got this one as far as a tall fig goes, and I just don't want to have too many tall figs. So smaller figs is fine. And these are my older ones, my first two. Both of these were rooted cuttings, and that's about 5 inches, and that one's about 3.5 inches. And again, both were rooted cuttings. And yeah, I try going big. I got nothing else to do. So there you have it. And hey, that's my Phoenix graft. How about that? Phoenix, can you see the bird looking shape? And that's a Procumbens nana. So anyway, I was working on some of the elms today, trimming, wiring, doing a little bit of work. And I got an air layer here. But anyway, to the stump, to the stump, to the stump. Okay, and this is our stump from that fig tree, and hopefully you can see better than I can. And right here is where I took off a rooted piece. I mounded sand up, soil up along the side of the tree, and that stuff rooted. I took another piece off right here also. This has some roots, but I'm not ready to take it off just yet. And I'm considering, well, actually I want a few figs. The tree is loaded with figs. But anyway, I will get back to this, score the bottom. That way I'll have a faster air layer or rooted piece, and I'll either put a pot under there, which is more likely, or I'll just mound the dirt up, soil up, and go from there. Okay, I mentioned a little while ago that the figs will root easily. Hopefully you can see all of these little spots, these little dots right here. Those will develop into roots. That's a root right there, just like that root. As if the humidity or the moisture level stays up, and again, if the tree comes into contact with soil, it will eventually root. I mean, even with humidity, this fig tree will just simply root. There's a grapefruit tree there, Pittosporum, a building. So this area can contain, and lots of leaves on the ground, can contain a lot of moisture, and the humidity will stay up in this area. And so this tree is actually rooted above the ground, only a few inches, but lots of the root buds have come out. I have sphagnum moss here, like 4 different places. I did not score any of it, and it's an experimentation, and I'm going to see if this will actually root under there. The pot right here, that is scored, you know, just like a normal air layer, taking off the bark all the way down to the wood, and all the cambium removed. And there's soil, same stuff that's right here on the ground, I put in this pot. This is actually a rooted piece that I just showed you, that where it was cut from that tree. So here's the experimentation. I'm trying to root 4 pieces without damaging the cambium, just a natural rooting process with keeping the humidity and the moisture up. I've got, as you can see right here, there's a good amount of sunshine coming in, but overhead directly there is lots of canopy to keep the tree shaded, and but we get enough heat coming in from the evening sun, but noonday sun and morning sun cannot burn this tree or overheat it. Again, the big experimentation, I just cut this off today, lots of roots. I've got that really good and moist, and I actually hit it with B1 solution in the water, and so even right now, I'm air layering and trying to encourage rooting on this just now piece of fig. The fig is so resilient. I mean, it's almost as resilient as crepe myrtle. And so personally, I'm just testing the indestructibility of this fig. And this I've had in this pot for a while, taken from the same tree. And again, 2 pieces here, just simply wrapped with sphagnum moss with B1 in it, and no scoring of the cambium or the bark. One of the areas that I showed you where I removed rooted pieces, so this just came off today, that just came off today also, and they're in a shady area, evening sun, lots of moisture right now, good and soaked, well watered in. And I'll hit this again. I've already done it several times today to make sure that the soil is well saturated and draining well also. There's no problem with letting it sit in the pot, like, you know, for 24, 48 hours. No issues. But you eventually have to allow the roots to breathe. So that stump right there is about 2.5 feet right now, and as it stands, this is my new apex, and here are some of my side branches, and I'll get to trimming and carving on this pretty soon, and this will likely come off. If it does not come completely off, I'll take it off in this area some way, and work with that also as part of the design. And we're moving. Lots of stuff. Oh, one of my Chinese elm. This was a collected piece, and I had it in a bonsai pot for several years, and one year it did not leaf out, and after about 3 months, 4 months, I pulled it out of its pot, put it in the ground, hoping that I could have gotten something back out of the root, and boom, here it is. That's about 7 inches across that way. Right here was the stump of the right here was the stump of the main tree, and this is a new growth that took over since I had it planted in the ground. And that's about once I noticed it leafing out again, and I checked it often, so it wasn't like I missed it for 6, 7, 8, 9 months or a year. I had it in the ground that one year. The next year it leafed out, and I found it leafing out in April, and so 2.5 years it grew this large. The main trunk on it was probably about an inch, inch and a half, and the roots was relatively straight. So most of this rootage here grew out while it was in the ground. And I'm kind of calling this like, what's that, Jango Fett or Boba Fett? The little spaceship he had in the older Star Wars. The one with Lando Calrissian in it when he was flying away from the city. Yeah, it looked like an iron. You know, well, most people don't know what an iron is nowadays. Nobody irons clothes anymore. But it's a device that you use to iron wrinkles out of your clothes. I know nobody knows what wrinkles are, and if they do, it's a style. So watch the Star Wars series and you'll see what I'm saying. It's the bounty hunter's spaceship. I guess that's more clear. But anyway, Django's machine. I don't know, Django, Bubba, whichever is the first one to come along. Well, anyway, I'll stop babbling. I nearly lost this pear tree. Had to leave town for a few days, 3 days, and the heat took it away. And I had other plants. They survived, I didn't lose anything, but it knocked it back. As a matter of fact, it knocked back 2 plantings of Trident Maples, and it just made them better. So, as they call it, a happy accident. So, here we go. We're walking. I showed the Trident Maple on a rock, and I took it out of its other planting and put it into this tray. And I thought to cinch up these roots more, but I went ahead and left it open, and that way I'm washing out gradually more and more of the roots and allowing the stronger roots to grow. And you can see right here there is some flexibility in there, so I'll have time to secure that, to cinch it up and cause it to clasp around this rock a bit tighter. And also, when push comes to shove, I can graft in seedlings to create roots in places that I might want to clear something out and put a new affair in there. You can see the roots coming around this way and headed around to the front of the rock to grasp it. Here's a shelf right here. The rock comes down and then comes out, kind of like an upside down 7 or backward L from this direction. And the tree sits on it. This was a rooted cutting, and you know, I've put it on here, and it's been doing pretty well by my account. I've trimmed it up a few times this season and pulled it down, done some wiring, and it's growing pretty good. And I just selected out some branches a few weeks ago. We're kind of almost at a dormancy state now. There's not much growth developing in the tree or pretty much anything around here. So I'm not going to do any trimming right now. I'm going to wait until I notice another growth spurt. But in the meantime, I'm going to just make sure that I can keep these things cool, because we've been hitting 90, 93 consistently. Already once overnight we've had a 90-degree temperature overnight, yes. So it's a matter of keeping things cool. Here's a fig tree, a ficus that I'm air layering the top out to reduce it. This branch right here is keeping this part alive, the lower trunk, and then I'll work with this. Once I get this off of here, I'll try to stimulate some growth in this area. And how do I do that? By taking a rough brush, toothbrush or something like that, and scraping the bark. Chinese elm, I've got 2 places where I am air layering out. Now, it may look like I'm air layering in line, but I'm not. Okay? The branch that goes here to the right, that's being air layered out, not the main trunk. And then the 2 branches here at the apex. So the trunk is still got all of its signals intact and its channels for communication with the leaves on all sides. And I've got another branch back here on the main trunk. But if all fails, I've got this branch to sustain the lower trunk. So it's not well. I'm glad you were here. So look at that. My pot slipped down. So I got to come back in here and put more soil on that. But you can see right there, that's where that white part. Not a problem. I'll come back later. Well, here we go. That is not a problem. This is only a few days old. So, and what I'll do is take sphagnum moss and put it on top of that, and it won't be a problem. These are crabapple root pieces. I did some ground layering on a crabapple early in the season when everything was just breaking dormancy, and so I took these root pieces and stuck them in the pot, brought them upright, and boom, here you have it. Oh, we're getting weather in, which is good. Look at that sky. I put on a bunch of air layers, including small leaf Trident maples. Small leaf Trident maples are notoriously difficult in trying to get them to root from cuttings. Right here we have the small leaf Trident, and right here we have the standard Trident maple, Acer bergeron. Okay, and someone gave me this one tree that I have planted up front, and I've tried taking cuttings. I've gotten 2 successful cuttings so far. Out of a couple of hundred, only 2 made it, and I've got them planted in the back 40, and they're probably 6-7 feet tall now, but you know, they're only about a quarter or a half inch or 3/8 inches. And so I'm going to air layer some of that out and start more plants. But what I did here was fuse in the normal, the typical, or the common Acer bergeron Trident maple to this other, and I planted this in the ground with the stump exposed to the ground, and I'm keeping this highly moist in an effort to try to get it to root on its own. If it roots on its own, great. If not, then I'll just cut this back, and what I'll do is air layer this small leaf Trident out as it goes and grows. Genius, right? I agree with you. You have good taste in geniuses. So here we have, and what I did was take 4 of these, fuse 4 pieces off of the same tree, and I've got 4 different plantings. Here we go right here. See, that's a real large one, and the air layered or the rootstock wasn't that large now, but it was a good rooted. It was actually a seedling, so it wasn't like a cutting, but cuttings will work too. It doesn't matter as long as it has good viable roots. You can see right here, this is the rootstock for the normal Trident maple, and you can see how large this is. That's about 1 inch right there on that small leaf Trident maple, and this is almost 5 feet tall with a fork in it. So that's a heavy load, but that rootstock is taking it well. This is a smaller piece, okay, and it's still doing well, but it was just smaller when I fused it together. Again, I take no shame in breaking standards and going above what supposedly can't be done, shouldn't be done, or no one's done. So that's to encourage folks, hey, do what you got a mind to do. Do what you have the ability to do. I mean, you can look back here, I got plenty of property. You look over there, plenty of property. And this was a seed started apple tree. So I have no idea of what kind of apple. It could be a Fuji, it could be a Granny Smith. I'm thinking it's a Granny Smith. And I've got a couple of these in here, so probably here pretty soon I'll air layer something out of here, and hopefully it'll live, and then I'll start working with that. Hey, you can see all of this. That's where I have my Trident maples growing. I walked out here one day, and probably like a 6-foot snake was in there, which is a coach whip. Yep, this is my big Trident Maple. I went and carved on it and cut it down some, and I'll whack the tops out again, but I'm working on it slow but sure, and this thing has a most awesome base to it. If you ever seen it before or remember it, most awesome. I used to have it right over here. Well, we're getting lightning in. I think I can run down here real quick and show you another fig tree that I'm working on. More fig trees, and you might remember the root over rock plantings. They're coming along really great. I've had them exposed all season, well, since early spring, and I'm letting them gradually get watered out and watered down. But again, the idea is to allow them to acclimate to the sunlight, the UV rays more specifically, and letting the roots harden off. I've got air layers here, late April, well no, May. About May the 25th thereabouts. This I just put on. That has roots already. This tree has roots. Not enough for me yet, but they have roots. And it didn't take long once I got them started. Right here, these cups, I have these side grafts, or fusion grafts as I call them, and they're coming along. The Acer bergeron, I had seedlings in pots or rooted cuttings, so I'll use all of that. And right here, you can probably see there, you can actually see how close that is. It's starting to fuse, and that's only after about 3 weeks now, and they're coming together. I'm sure they're not strong enough to withstand being separated right now. And right here you can see the fusing right there. And this is just a few weeks old. This is the air layer, my main air layer. You can see roots right here. And right there, roots. They're starting to brown out. They were completely white just a few days ago. And again, back there you can see roots all through here. And roots in the bottom coming out of the pot. And this was after May 25th. And here we are, June 28th right now, 29th. So, yeah, 29th. So anyway, this air layers really well. I mean, it to me is air layering even better than the standard Trident Maple. The Acer bergeron, commonest. I mean, I do air layer the other, but I get really good results and success just, and see there's another fuse up here. So I've got probably 12 items on this one tree. And again, a buddy from Texas sent this to me a few years back. I nearly lost it, and right here where this ugly bulge is right here is where a new apex started growing when it kind of got too dry and was, you know, just not doing well at the time. Plus I had it in a pot at the time. Well, that's probably 4 inches across the base there, and it's been here 3 years now. So so it's doing really well, small leaf, and this will reduce down so much more. That's about 3 inches right there, but it will reduce down to something like this consistently, and that's less than a 3/8 inch right there. You know, so this small leaf Trident Maple will reduce down substantially. You can hear the rumbling. You can see the pots over there. A Japanese green maple, and again, part of this is just an update. I've shown and talked about my 16-foot air layer, Japanese green maple, still alive. It had some dieback, but I think that's mostly because it's just too shady right there, and the tree has bounced a little bit from the weather, even though I've staked it or whatever. And I've got a few air layers there. You can see in the tree right there. The Naruto over here, I am very hopeful that this Naruto will root out on its air layers. I've got 2 pots here, and to me it looks like I see a bit of bulging, and this is about where I usually have the air layer, you know, 3/4 of the pot for roots and such, and moisture retention, and then the surface. You can see here my pot busted open, so I've got to get back in here real quick and rework that. And more pots, and I check these as often as I can. So soil, bay leaf tree over there that I've air layered. So anyway, that is kind of my update, and more roots here on these Japanese green maple. You can see the roots, they're even turning brown now as they mature. Lots of heat coming in here, which is good for them. They're still getting moisture, and I'll probably sever those in the next week or 2 weeks, and then I'll be putting on more air layers. Here's a little shohin tree that I'm working on. You can see the roots here. Japanese green maple. So, and this red maple here, I got to get back in here. Things get away from you. See all the weeds, feverfew. But anyway, just as long as a snake don't jump out here at me, I'll be okay. And if it does, don't laugh at me, because I'm going to jump and he's going to run his way. And this is a whole tree that I dug and transplanted. It's in shock. It's not doing too well, but it's still here. And this thing fell over 5, 6, 7 times, and it's still here. Once I planted it, I staked it, had larger stakes in it earlier. Again, see the roots on my air layer, and these were late May. You can see roots here coming through. And that is probably 7, 8 feet of tree. Why do I do it 7 to 8 feet? Because I want the stump on that tree. Some of the other trees, all I needed at the time is upper branches. So I've got hundreds of trees around here, dozens of trees in adult state or mature state, whichever you want to consider it as being. And so I vary, you know, what I take off. So I go with trunks to do like the Japanese green maple right in the center there. That's about 12 inches tall, which is going to give me a nice little shohin. Ficus Carica, that thing is leafed out really, really nicely. And these Trident maples. So anyway, I've got work to do to reclaim that pot, put some sphagnum on this before that weather comes in. And I found a shady area to put my Japanese green maples that are in bonsai pot. I mean, I was having fits right and left. Back to the small leaf Trident maples. This is a pot that I cleared, and I did take some rooted pieces out of it, and these were just calloused, and so I just let that go, repotted them. That's probably 24 pots right there, and I can only visualize probably 3 or 4 plants with roots or leaves on them, and these are the small leaf tridents. Like I said, they're notorious, and what I do here is when I'm trimming certain trees, I'll stick them right in the ground where I stand. This is a normal Trident Maple. Can't see it very well. That's a real nice trunk. And on the back side, I chopped off a big old trunk, and it's healing really well. And I chopped that off probably December or January. So that was almost 2 inches, and it's nearly closed up. And it's growing in this little culvert. I've removed one of these plants, which is this one right here. And I'm developing this one as an exposed root, which I have in that deep pot, developing the roots. I've got the roots bound inside of there to get them to clasp together. I thought about sticking a rock in it, but nah. So I'll have that. And then this other, I had this planted in the ground on that rock. Another Trident Maple. Can't visualize it very well. Let's see. Move this. Excuse me. Pardon me. So here we are. So this is a pretty nice little upright tree. Has a pretty good taper to it as it goes to the apex. But unfortunately, I used a lopping shear when I whacked it out of the ground over here by that apple. That's a wisteria in that pot with the white rock there, you see, right below it where that white piece is. I had it planted there on this rock. And I used a lopping shear to knock the top, and it damaged the cambium. I thought it was sharp enough and knew enough to do a good job, but I should have gotten my pull saw. At any rate, I've got enough branches here that, hey, it'll cover up my sins. So anyway, here we go. That is about it for right now. There's always more to talk about, but I wanted to give you the main update on that air layered Trident Maple that had the infestation, and kind of show some of the things that were going on here recently. Remember, if you do an air layer and you, well, I just say go ahead and treat the plant, you know, before you cut it off, and then let the materials that you use to treat it with have its time to pass, you know, usually 3 days, you know, and then treat it right after you sever the air layer. Typically something more than 2 or 3 inches. You know, smaller things, I don't have any issues around here with any kind of borer activity on smaller plants. It's just whatever I have that's larger. And I've had trees out front that I had in a pot, and when I removed it from the growing pot out front to put it into a bonsai pot, next thing you know, borers are into it. So, and that was probably 4 inches at the base. So I'm just saying, be careful of the wild outdoors. There are all kinds of stuff and things. So anyway, have fun. Later.